All right, Parsha 101, Parshas Kedoshim. This Parsha, it's actually a little bit of a shorter Parsha, but there's a lot of laws listed in it. Some that are familiar, some that we haven't seen yet. And there's not a lot of detail necessarily in the text. And so we're just going to rattle them off, and just as a general thing. So the name of the Parsha is Kedoshim. Kedoshim is holy. It comes from the second verse of the Parsha. The first verse is V'adaber Hashem al Moshe Lemar. Hashem spoke to Moshe saying, that Dabar El Kol Adas B'nai Yisrael, speak to the entire congregation of the Jewish people, as in this isn't only for men or only for whoever's going to show up. You got to tell us to everyone. V'marta Lam, tell them Kedoshim to you. You have to be holy. Ki Kedosh Ani Hashem Elokechem, because I am the God. Your God. I'm holy. So the whole thing of Kedoshim, part of the theme. Of course, we've had many commandments. It's not singular, these commandments, in making us holy. The entire Torah and mitzvos is for ourselves, for refining ourselves, for making ourselves holy. But a lot of the theme of the mitzvot is we must do them because we're supposed to be holy, and we are supposed to be holy because God is holy, and through doing them we become holy. And it's not just a matter of whether or not, oh yeah, I could figure out this mitzvah, or like, sure, I'm not going to eat spiders because they're gross, but I do this because this is what God has said, and through this we become holy. And it's a common refrain, sort of, that a lot of the commandments and the laws, when they're said, do this, because I am holy. Do this, because I am God. Do this, because you must be holy. So these, if you see it in the Hebrew text, when you look at the Parsha, you'll see the words come up very frequently. God says, you got to do this because I am God. You got to do this because you got to be holy. Different things like that. We're not necessarily going to repeat it each time. We're just going to go through all the things that are spoken about in this week's Parsha. So the opening one is Ishmael v'av Torah. A man is supposed to, a person's got to fear or respect their mother and father. And it's just a small thing. It's interesting because in the 10 Commandments, it says honor your father and mother. And here it says respect or fear your mother and father. And there's a switch there intentionally, that they say that it's people are more naturally inclined to give honor to their mother. So that's why when it says honor your father and mother, it puts the father first. Like, remember him too, give him honor. But when it speaks about having kind of fear or more awe, respect in that regard, that's more natural for the father, that people will feel that for their father and for their mother. So here when it talks about, when it uses this phrase, it puts the mother first. Like, you also, it's not just enough to be honoring her, you got to be treating with this sort of extra level of awe, fear, respect. And kind of the commentaries say, what does it mean to show them that? It's, well, you don't sit in their seat, right? If the parent has a designated seat, you don't sit in their seat. And you don't outright contradict them. Like, no, you're wrong, that's not how it goes. There's ways about these things. Okay, and then it goes to, then the law after that says you got to guard the Shabbos. And also as a parenthetical, it says this is close to honoring, respecting the parents, unless the parents tell someone not to keep Shabbos. So a respect and honor for parents come before all else, unless the parents tell someone to go against the Torah, in which case they're no longer obligated to follow their parents. And it says, don't even turn to the thoughts of idolatry, don't even go to idolatry, don't make molten images for yourself. Then it talks about the Karban Shlam and the peace offering, that it has to be shechted and brought with the intention that this is for God. It's supposed to be eaten on the same day. Leftover meat is called pigul, and it's not supposed to be eaten. It's got to be burned. So you see the big rat-a-tat-tat here of all the commandments that are just being listed. Then it goes to Peah, which we sort of saw before, Peah and Leket. That is, there's a section of the field that is supposed to be left unharvested, like a corner of the field. It's also when people are gathering up the stalks, there's part of the glean, like the fallen gleaning. So like parts, if a few stalks fall out, you're supposed to leave it there. And that's specifically for poor people to come, and they say also for the convert. And the convert, because the convert does not specifically has a portion of a land, right? When the land's going to be split up, it's between the Jewish people. Converts come afterward. So they don't specifically have their own land. So this way, when it's an agrarian society, they'll have, this section is left for them to be able to get grains from, or whatever it is. And it says it also the same thing for grapevine. So when you go to harvest your grapes and stuff like that, you're supposed to leave over. And then it says, okay, outright don't steal. There shouldn't be any false denial of like, oh, he never paid back the loan, he never gave me a guarantee for his loan. You're not allowed to, don't lie, don't swear falsely, and don't swear falsely in God's name. You profane my name when you do that. Then it says, don't oppress your fellow. And here, the commentators say, doesn't mean oppress is to not pay them on time. So if someone's working, if someone's your employer, you got to pay them on time. And it says, don't rob. What's the difference between robbing and stealing? So it kind of says that stealing is something that's considered done like a little bit more secretly, and robbing is considered more brazen and out in the open. So that's kind of the difference here. And then also when it says don't rob, it's talking about also that if someone's a day worker, you got to pay them that day into nightfall, but by the next morning they got to be paid. You can't wait until the next morning for paying them. Then it says you're not supposed to curse someone, whether deaf, or it brings in deaf people also, but you're not allowed to curse someone whether or not they can hear you, is basically the thing. And then here, don't place a stumbling block before a blind person. It doesn't just specifically mean someone who can't see. It also specifically means someone who can't see a full picture. So you're not supposed to give someone advice with your own ulterior motive that is not to the benefit of them, but to the benefit of you, right? So it's like, well, I'm still providing them a service, but you're doing it with your own ulterior motive, and I'm going to give you the information that's best for you, and then leave it to them, and then you can make the best decision. So that's what it means not to place a stumbling block before a blind person. Then it goes into that there should be no injustice in your judgment, right? You can't give preferential treatment to a poor person because you're like, oh, he's poor and he anyways, the rich person has to support a poor person, so I'm just going to rule in his favor. Or if it's a rich person, you're like, oh, I don't want to embarrass the rich person, so I'm not going to, I'm going to rule in his favor. You got to do that. You got to be honest, and you have to have righteousness in your justice and your judgments. And then it says not to be a gossip monger. So it's called rechilos, which is, oh, did you hear what whomever said about you? You're not allowed to, don't do that. There's also a thing that Chassidus teaches that when there's lashon hara, when there's slander and evil speech, there's three people that are harmed: the person who says it, and the person who hears it, and the person that it's about. So, well, where's the person who's about? Where do they come in? They weren't necessarily part of the conversation. So the idea about where harm to them comes is that speaking evilly about someone draws and focuses on negative characteristics and character and aspects of them. So it kind of gives those negative parts more strength by speaking evilly about them. Which is why it's always good to always try to find positive things to say about other people, and just don't talk about other people. And then it goes to lo samod al dam recha, don't stand on the blood of your friend. And Rashi, actually a foremost commentator of the Torah, says, if someone sees someone that their life is in danger and they can help them, you got to go help them. And Rashi explains it to say that it's the reason why you're seeing this is because you can help them. So, and then of course Chassidus will take it to a spiritual approach. If someone is, God forbid, in a spiritual kind of danger, and they seem to be spiritually in a very, quote unquote, a deathly kind of place, then we gotta save them. Not, oh, we're gonna save you, but we gotta try to help them and do what we can for them. Then it says you're not supposed to hate your brother in your heart, and also rebuke your fellow to keep them from sin. If it seems like someone's going towards sin, then you're supposed to rebuke them. Also, Chassidus tells us, why are these two next to each other? Don't hate your brother in your heart and rebuke your fellow, because you got to make sure that rebuke is coming from the right place, right? You got to do it in the right way. They say that before you go to other, you got to pare your own nails first. They're not just like, oh, because the Torah tells us we got to make sure, blah, blah, blah. And then you're not being careful in the rebuke, and you're not making sure to not embarrass someone or not say it in a way that they can accept it, and you're not coming from a good place. So it says make sure you're coming from the right kind of place when you're doing this. It's kind of the Chassidic teaching on this. And then it says you're not allowed to enact revenge. You're not allowed to bear a grudge. So, oh, I'll lend this to you even though you didn't lend something to me. You're not allowed to do any of that kind of stuff. And then here, v'ahavta l'recha kamocha, it actually comes right here. You should love your neighbor as yourself, is in this week's Torah portion. We have Hillel said when the possible convert said, tell me the whole Torah 1 foot. Right, Hillel says, don't do unto others what you don't want done to yourself. That's the whole Torah. The rest is commentary. How can you say that? Nothing else. Look at all the other things we've got here. And there's death penalties and whatever. Because what Hillel's saying, this is again a Chassidic interpretation. It actually speaks about in Tanya. When you say don't do unto others what you don't want done to yourself, the sort of v'ahavta l'recha kamocha thing. We can only have true love for someone else when we don't look at the external. And what is beyond the external? Not just the internal, but the soul. When we focus on the spiritual over the physical, that is how we can have true love for someone else. And that is the whole Torah, the focus on the spiritual over the physical, right? Uniting and connecting and developing a relationship with God. Then after that, it goes into the prohibition against kilayim. Kilayim is when mixing, crossbreeding of species. And this goes for livestock. This goes for grains and vegetables. And this also goes in clothing for a mixture of wool and linen, which is called shatnez. Shatnez in this week's Torah portion. Some people are very, very religious about shatnez. And wool and linen can't be worn in the same garment, but if it's two separate garments, like a shirt and a skirt or whatever, then it's different. It just can't be the same garment. Okay, then it actually goes into a different aspect of relationships that are not allowed. It says if a man sleeps with a bondwoman, so she's someone who's not yet totally free, and she might even be betrothed to her master's bondman. So someone who has these two bond peoples can say, oh, you guys are going to marry each other, and then your kids, and everyone's going to work for me, or whatever. This is not, it seems that this is not rape. It's that they're both in this relationship together. So it says the courts have to conduct an investigation, and if this is what occurred, then this is adultery. And the death penalty is the punishment for adultery, or the consequence of adultery. Now, if not, that this is not the case of her not yet being, that she is fully redeemed and she's not betrothed, whatever, then there's lashes for her, and the man has to bring a guilt offering of a ram. Then it goes to Orla. Orla is this thing that says when you come to land, you're going to plant, etc. A fruit tree that you plant, you're not allowed to eat from it for the first 3 years. It's considered Orla, you're not allowed to have it. In the 4th year, all the fruit that grew on the tree is considered holy. You got to bring it to Jerusalem, and you got to eat it in Jerusalem. Why Jerusalem? Because that's around the base of Mikdash, and you're going to sing praises to God of like, yay, thank you so much for what you've given me. Now, if you can't bring the fruit there, you could sell the fruit, then you got to take the money and buy food in Jerusalem with that money and eat it there. The 5th year says you can eat freely from whatever you want. And it also says your produce will increase in the 5th year. So this one actually says you can keep Orla, don't eat the first 3 years, because, and then the 4th year is going to be holy, so that your 5th year should be that much better. It's like a promise that Hashem makes that keeping this is going to lead to this. And kind of also a Chassidic take on this is that we got to make sure that the actions that we're doing, like why we have such an emphasis on the agriculture and the fruits and the trees and all this sort of stuff, because we want to make sure that our actions that we do are supposed to bear fruit. Like our actions in the spiritual, they're supposed to have an effect. We're supposed to make sure something comes of it, and that we're not just arbitrarily doing stuff. There's no contextual vacuum of where we're at. Then it goes, okay, there's a prohibition of not to eat the meat of an animal until the animal's fully dead, like it stopped moving or anything like that. So it's like an extent. Another part of kosher, it says that you're not allowed to act on omens or on like made up auspiciousness, like the whole Friday the 13th, and someone actually changes their behavior from that. It's not allowed. You can't just make up days that you're like, oh, whatever, I saw this, the black cat or something occurred, so that's an omen of whatever. You're not allowed to believe in that. Then it goes into this whole thing about hair cutting. And this specifically applies to men, they say. The commentators say this specifically applies to men because it's attached to beards. So it says you're not supposed to round off the hair on the head. So like you shouldn't have this like circular kind of haircut. Not specifically a bowl cut, but so it says like the hair near the temples, you're not supposed to cut it, which is kind of where the whole idea of payas comes from. In Chabad circles, they don't specifically grow out the payas extra long because the Arizal did not do that, and that's what Chabad follows. But still, the area there, it doesn't get shaved down all the way. And then it also talks about not to cut like the corners of the edges of the beard. And it says there's 5 places that's here, you're not allowed to cut it. And the commentaries say that specifically with a specific kind of razor. So a lot of people today who do cut their beard, like Orthodox people who do cut their beards, there's a whole thing of how you're allowed to cut it and what you could cut it with, so that it's kind of a workaround here. The Hasidism are much stricter about this because there's a Kabbalistic connection between growing out the beard and all that kind of stuff. But there is a specificity in the language of it that people are following when certain decisions are made about this. Okay, and then it goes to talks about mourning, that someone if someone passes away, there's going to be a mourning period for them, but you're not allowed to indulge in excessive mourning. And here it specifically talks about you can't cut yourself out of grief. It also says that there's no tattoos are allowed. Then it says you're not allowed to defile your daughter by turning her into a prostitute or with any extramarital relationships. If you do that, the land's going to be filled with immorality. You can't treat your daughters this way. And then it says you got to observe Shabbos, you got to revere my sanctuary, right? So the base of Mikdash, the Mishkan. It goes back to you're not allowed to do any divination, try to talk through a bone or something like that and try to see the future. You're not allowed to do any of that kind of stuff. I'm the one you come to when you need messages, okay? And because then you can defile yourself. Then it says you're supposed to rise before the elderly, and it also says those who are greater than you in wisdom. That's what the commentators put in also. It's actually, the fun fact, it's the one mitzvah you technically have to be sitting in order to fulfill, right? To rise before the elderly, you have to first be sitting to stand up. And then also, like, don't sit in their seat and don't outwardly contradict them. Treat them with respect. It says you're not allowed to taunt a convert. You got to treat them the same as anybody else, and you got to love them as you love yourself. You were also strangers once, because the word in Hebrew is ger, and you were also once strangers in the land of Egypt, right? You can't be like, oh, remember when you weren't and you used to, you're not allowed to do that kind of stuff. You got to treat people right. And then it goes into this whole thing of, it says you're not a perversion of justice by messing with your weights and measures. That's kind of a little paraphrase. As in, so like with the length, area, the weight, the liquid volume or the dry volume or anything, not only you're not allowed to have incorrect weights and measures and scales, but you're not even allowed to own them. So it's not just, oh, they're just there, but I'm not going to use them. And there's this whole thing about how owning them is kind of indicative and represents like an evil intent, because an honest person does not even own these things. But I'm not going to use them. Well, they shouldn't be there. Like, why do you have this? What is this doing here? So you're not even allowed to own them. You got to be honest. You got to be, righteous in the things that you do. You have to have accurate weights and scales. It's very important. And then it says, guard and fulfill all my rules and ordinances. And then it actually shifts kind of to punishments, or we can say consequences of certain things. We'll kind of go through. So some of it, if you remember from last week's portion, it mentioned this whole thing about the Moloch worship. So kind of idol would pass the child between these two twin flames, etc., etc. So this is death by stoning if someone transgresses in this. And not just that, but the family has to give this person up. You can't just let this idolater like hang out, because we have to rid the land of idolatry. And if you don't take care of it, then this person's going to have kares, which is excision. Either they die prematurely or they're childless or something like that. God's like, you don't take care of it, I'm going to take care of it. Then it also talks about someone who does divination. It's kares, or this person is a diviner, has done divination. There's a death penalty that goes to that. It says, V'yisem Kedoshim, you have to be holy, right? You got to sanctify yourself. And until you get there, you act in a holy way and you will become holy. Then it goes into the whole thing about forbidden relationships. Well, first it says someone who curses their parents, like outwardly, they go out and they curse their parents. The death is by stoning. Then it goes into the whole thing with forbidden relationships, which I'm not going to relist them all here, but all the ones that were listed at the end of the last week's Torah portion, this week, it goes into the punishment for each one. A lot of them, the punishment is stoning. So a lot of them come with a death penalty. Some of them come with like burning. Adultery, we said already, that's a death penalty for both people who commit this. All of these, it seems, are all consensual relationships. It's not talking about rape, God forbid. That comes in a different parsha. But in all these relationships, if someone does any of these things, most of them end in or have a death penalty attached to them. And it depends. It's strangulation, stoning, or burning. Like, which one is it going to be? And then bestiality, the person and the animal are both supposed to be killed. There are certain ones that it's not a death penalty for. You can look in the Parsha to see exactly which ones they are. But for example, if someone sleeps with a woman when she's a nida, so she's in the middle of her menstrual cycle, then it's lashes. That's not a death penalty. There's some other ones also that the punishment is lashes and not a death penalty. But there are repercussions for these transgressions. And it says also, don't go in the way of the nations of the land that I'm going to give you. You're not supposed to go. They did all these kinds of things. They engage in all these forbidden relationships. They did all the things that I'm forbidding you. Don't do that. That's what I'm taking the land away from them. I'm going to give it to you now. This is going to be a good land for you, right? You got to do these things. I'm Lord your God. I separated you. I distinguished you from among the nations, and you got to be holy. And then it kind of puts in, the Parsha ends off with, You should distinguish between animals that are pure and impure, like ritually pure and impure, and also the foul and all, the creepy crawlies and all those things. Basically, the punchline of everything is you got to be holy unto me. Be holy unto me. I'm the Lord your God. I am holy, and you got to be holy. And that is Parshas Kedoshim.